ignore the tone of voice and ignore the words that someone is saying and listen to the message. And that's probably one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned in my life, was that someone could be screaming and someone could be shouting at you and someone could be swearing you. But layers below all of that is a powerful message that you can use to shift yourself. And if you get distracted by the narrative, or you get distracted by the words, or you get distracted by the tone of voice, you will never ever learn the lesson. So one of the most powerful lessons is learn to carve away the noise to listen to the message.
This is episode number 109 of The Inspiring Talk with Shayamal Vallabhjee. Welcome back inside yet another episode of The Inspiring Talk. My name is Bijay Gautam. I'm your host for this show. Each week, I interview today's most successful and inspiring personalities to help you realize your inner potential. I'm excited to bring back Shayamal on this episode of The Inspiring Talk. Since our last conversation, Shayamal has been the person whom I could reach out with my life questions, and insights he shares has completely changed my perspective about a lot of things. Shayamal's work on healing is hugely appreciated by people across, and the depth that he brings on any interaction is something I'm fascinated with. This episode is extremely powerful as we go deep into the power of gratitude, how you can start making this a part of your life. We talk about journaling, and Shayamal shares the journaling prompts that you can use, and trust me, some of these questions are going to make you question your beliefs and uncover those layers and go deeper within yourself. You will also learn how to deal with competition, how do you accept your flaws, and a lot. I enjoyed doing the exercise Shayamal shares on this episode to help us remain humble and treat every human being equally. That simple exercise is transformative. I'm also very excited to share that Shayamal and my team at Wine Studio have been working for the past few months on a new podcast called Perishable Wisdom, where Shayamal and his guests go down the rabbit hole of peak performance and psychology. With just 5 released episodes, the podcast is already on the top charts on Apple Podcast. Do check the show out. I'll put the link in the description of this episode. Now, without further ado, let me welcome Shayamal Vallabhjee. Shayamal, welcome back to The Inspiring Talk. Good to have you back.
Thank you very, very much. I always love being here.
Super. And the last episode that we did together, a lot of people really appreciated the wisdom and insights that you have to share with the audience. So how are you dealing with the whole COVID situation? How have you been navigating through the entire situation?
I've had my ups and downs, Bijay. Honestly, it started off pretty easy. In March last year, I was locked down in Goa for 3 or 4 months. Then I experienced a little bit of loss because, my spiritual master and my friend passed away. My dad landed in hospital. So 2 months went into that. It took me another 2 months to really process all of that, understand all of that, and really pick myself up to move forward. So quite honestly, to everyone listening, from like July till about end of November, I did very little. And with the exception of the only thing that happened in that time was my book, Breathe, Believe, Balance, launched. And I think the only reason it launched was because I finished writing it in March. So the work was done and it was just up to the publisher to release it. And then after that, I started picking myself up again in December. And now I'm back full swing into writing, recording, all sorts of things. So excited.
Super. So more often than not, Shayamal, a lot of people focus on what we lack instead of what we have. And while a lot of people in the personal transformation space say that you need to be grateful, you need to have gratitude for the good things that happens in your life, and it's easy for you to focus on what you lack instead of being grateful for what you have. And a lot of people actually feel that, oh, you know what? Is there a process that I can feel more grateful, or is there a way that I can, or a ritual that I can bring in my life? For instance, personally for me, I journal and write things down that I'm grateful about, and that really helps me, where I'm constantly just noting down the things, and that also makes me want to focus more on, hey, what are the things that I'm grateful for today? And it forces me to kind of think about those three things that I have to write down on my journal every single day, right? So what does that process look like for you? And maybe different practices that you do to count your blessings.
Yeah, that's a great question. So fundamentally, journaling is a process that I use as well, and I'm a firm believer in the process of journaling. And someone needs to understand why journaling is such a powerful practice. Well, the first thing about journaling is you converting the mixed emotions in your head into something that's black and white and concrete on paper. So if you don't have clarity in your mind, you're going to have to find clarity to put it down on paper. So the first thing that journaling does is it helps you bring clarity to the thoughts that you have and the emotions that you have. First thing. The second thing is gratitude as a practice. Now, journaling, you can journal about anything. You can journal about pain, you can journal about the future, you can journal about the past. But gratitude is a practice about the now. So you're asking yourself, what am I grateful for now? Okay. Now, the reason why gratitude journaling is so powerful is because gratitude as a practice brings your thoughts from the past, where it's really focusing on the mistakes you've made, the future where you are focusing on the fear of failure. You're bringing it right down and you're concretizing it right here and right now. Okay. So the emotions and the hormones that are driving your body or your physiology from the other two spectrums are no longer present because you're present right here and right now. Okay. So gratitude as a practice can not only bring clarity to your thoughts, but it can also shift your physiology. Because when you focus on the here and now, there's no fear of failure, or there's no fear of failure from previously as well, from the past. You understand? You're just focusing now. So when the mind starts focusing on the here and now, and there's no fear present in the here and now, and if you spend enough time in that process, your physiology shifts. So it's a fundamentally powerful practice, and I use it in different manners. One is gratitude to center my energy right here and now, but I also bring gratitude into the form of like gratitude stones, which I leave all over my house, which have the word gratitude stone written on them. And I hold them, and for those moments that I'm holding it, I'm thinking about what are the things I'm grateful for. I do it through a journaling practice. My practices like chanting and meditation in themselves are gratitude practices. My breath work ends with a gratitude meditation where I repeat to myself at least 20 to 30 times, I am grateful for, and I complete the sentence with one thing I'm grateful for. Okay. And each time I force myself to become more mindful of that. The process of journaling is a little different. The process of journaling is where you find clarity, BJ. And you can only find clarity when you sit with something for long enough. Now, what journaling really helps with is it helps bring awareness to a particular problem, right? But remember, awareness is the second step of healing. The first step of healing is willingness. You must be willing to heal for
Hmm.
you to still the mind long enough to draw awareness to it. When you draw awareness to something, you can accept it. When you accept it, you can take responsibility for it. And when you take responsibility for it, then you can focus on the problem and then shift that problem. So, those are the steps of healing. It's willingness, awareness, acceptance, empowerment, and focus. And once you accept these in your life and you bring this in part of your journaling process, you'll find a massive shift in your psychology, in your healing, and you'll be ensuring that every single hurdle you face is moving you forward in some shape and form.
Wow, great! I love some of those things that I think holding the stone, gratitude stone, and having something like that. I think is such a great way to remind yourself to be constantly be in gratitude, as you said, right? Like for now, I have also always realized that whenever your mind kind of focuses on what you lack and thinks that's not going right way, and it's often easier for you to forget all the good things that you have in your life, and just by that gratitude practice, just by feeling grateful for what you have and starting to focus on what you already have, then you all of a sudden switch your brain and you start looking for the good things, right? So you mentioned about journaling, Shamal. I would like to talk specifically about journaling process, not only the gratitude practice using the power of journal. So what is your usual journaling process? Is it like you use a lot of questions, prompts, or it's just you just want to start on a blank piece of paper and write what you are feeling and thoughts that's going on ahead, or it depends on what is it that you want to journal about?
The first thing I do is I'm always building a list of prompts that I can answer. But before
Mm-hmm.
I start the process of writing, I generally center myself with a little bit of breath work. I calm the mind, so I'm destabilizing or desensitizing the parasympathetic nervous system and making sure that I'm really calm and relaxed at that time, or the sympathetic nervous system. And after that, I set an intention for that practice. So, what is it that I'd like to find from here? What is the clarity I'd like to bring? Intention is very important because intention drives your energy. Where your intention goes, your energy goes. Where your energy goes, everything grows. Now, I have a long list of journal prompts, and then I sit with that and I sort of peel away the layers of those questions. The first thing I do when I'm journaling is, if I ask a question in there, okay, I draw a sort of vision board of all of those things that question is pertinent to, all of the aspects of my life, or all of the people in my life that that particular question is actually pertinent to. I can ask, then reframe that question in different ways. What are the other ways I would ask this exact same question? And has that question ever cropped up in my mind? Then I'm trying to understand, am I consciously fighting it or subconsciously fighting it in that question? So when I'm asking this question, I'm saying to myself, okay, right, is this present in my life? And is it a constant daily conscious battle? Or is it a subconscious battle that's sabotaging my growth moving forward? I look at my belief systems around that. Now, that's called setting the framework. So you're setting the framework for how to answer questions so that you can get clarity out of that question and move forward with it. And then I spend anywhere from about 10 to 15 minutes really and truly absorbing that. Now, my journaling process happens preferably in the morning around the same time. So I journal at about 9:30 in the morning every single day. And then I reread my journal entry in the evening before I go to bed, because there's a lot of power
Hmm.
in rereading it, seeing how it goes. And then I have a really beautiful practice, which people are going to think I'm crazy, but this is what I do. If the practice or the result of the journaling practice requires that I need to shift a belief system, if it requires that,
Mm-hmm.
I write the belief system, my new belief system,
Mm.
on a piece of paper. And when I'm lying in bed and falling asleep, it's a small post it note. I leave that post it note on my heart, because the words and the
Mm.
energy of that belief system, your body can intuitively and subconsciously feel it and pull it into every cell.
Mm. I love that.
So that's something a little different that I do with my journaling process. And since you asked journaling, what I wanted to do was run people through maybe a few questions that I ask myself of some of my journal prompts.
That would be really helpful.
And maybe they could listen to these. So I've got a whole list and I won't read all of them, but I'd read you a few. So under prompts, for example, self-reflection, I ask myself, what do I need to let go of now? And if I trusted myself to let go of this, how would my life shift? What is something important that I need to remind myself of daily? Can I surrender to my thoughts, feelings, and emotions? And what does it feel like to surrender? What does a healthy boundary mean to me? And can I recognize it in my life? What is the kindest thing I've ever said to myself? If I had a crystal ball that could answer only one question, what would I ask it? I ask myself, who do you need to forgive and why? And what is stopping me from doing this? Then a powerful one is, what is the areas in my life that I am playing it safe? Then in prompts for gratitude, I ask myself to write about a time a stranger was kind to me and how did it make me feel. I ask myself to write a letter to a parent thanking them for three things that they taught me. I write a 100-word thank you note to three people who helped me this week. I ask myself, how often do you feel you should be more grateful for things? So, not how often am I more grateful, how often do I actually feel I should be more grateful for things? Then, what mistake or failure am I most grateful for and why? And then I ask myself, what are the things in my life that make me feel safe and protected? Then, some examples of prompts for forgiveness is, when was the last time I truly forgave someone? How would I teach forgiveness by example? Do you feel forgiveness makes you stronger or more vulnerable? What is a good way in which you can apologize sincerely? Write a forgiveness letter to a younger version of yourself that is no more than 250 words of any date of your choosing. And then a few prompts around self love that I'll take you through. What is the nicest compliment that you've ever received? Define self love in one statement. And what is one thing that you can do to
Mm-hmm.
love yourself more each day? What does your best friend brag about you when they're talking about you? What is it that you need to
Mm.
say no to more often? What brings happiness to your life and how can you add more to it? So these are just a few examples of certain prompt
Wow.
questions that I work on every single day. And people make the mistake of thinking once you've answered a question, it's done. No, I have 50 to 60
Mm.
prompts and I keep revisiting them. Sometimes I revisit them monthly, weekly, sometimes every 6 months. Depends on what I'm intuitively feeling that day.
That also changes with the stage that you are in your life, right? And the power of questions, asking yourself the question. This is something that I discovered back in 2019, and since I have been asking a lot of questions to myself, and I must say, this is such a powerful thing to ask yourself question, because then it starts uncovering the layers about yourself that you never thought existed within you, and those are really, really powerful questions, Shamal. So the other thing that I want to ask you is, lately I have been thinking a lot about the flaws that we all have, and I have been asking myself, hey, what are the lessons that I have learned from my flaws? What is it that my flaws are teaching me? And one of the most important ones that came up to me is acceptance. So now there are two parts to this. First part of that is acceptance of myself and my own flaws, and owning them, saying that that's this is a part of me. And what I've also realized is, while you accept your own flaws, that also teaches you to accept other people around you the way they are, because you have learned to accept your flaws. Then you are not looking for perfection in someone else, because you realize that, oh, you know what, I am myself not a perfect person, and I can't expect someone else to be the perfect. And so acceptance is one of the important lesson that I realized my flaws kind of taught me. So are there lessons that you have learned from your flaws, and if yes, then what would be those lessons?
I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and you ask it in a very nice way. The first question is, have you made mistakes in your life? Okay, and I think everyone will say yes to that. Then the next question that follows up, if you look at the linearity of the rational mind, is, have you learned from it? The answer is no, that will take you down a different organogram. And the answer is, if it's yes, then what have you learned from it? And then you can chronologically look at the power, the impact of those failures or those learnings in your life. So, a few ones that you're asking. The first thing I learned is that, I come from the world of professional sport, and the world of professional sport is not a very kind place at times. We talk about love, we talk about
Mm.
compassion, but really often we love each other, but the tone of voice and the words we're using are not very loving at that moment, because we work in a high pressure, cutthroat environment. Everyone looks at the athlete that is at the top, and everyone wants to be the athlete. But trust me, there's an equally larger population of people who are trying to be the you in that environment, because there's one physio, there's one doctor, there's one sports scientist in that environment, and everybody wants to be that person as well. So it's quite cutthroat in some shape and form. So the first lesson I learned, which was really powerful, was to ignore the tone of voice and ignore the words that someone is saying, and listen to the message. And that's probably one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned in my life, was that someone could be screaming and someone could be shouting at you and someone could be swearing you. But below all of that, layers below all of that, is a powerful message that you can use to shift yourself. And if you get distracted by the narrative, or you get distracted by the words, or you get distracted by the tone of voice, you will never ever learn the lesson. So, one of the most powerful lessons is learn to carve away the noise to listen to the message. Linked to that one, there is another powerful lesson, which is try to learn from the people who disagree with you the most. They're your greatest critics, and
Mm.
your greatest critics will always give you the biggest
Mm.
direction. So learn to learn from those you disagree with. Yeah. Then, when it comes closer to home with relationships and people, you know, I used to always get upset a lot. I used to react. I used to have these knee jerk reactions. And I realized that knee jerk reactions erode the dignity from every single relationship. So, the one thing that I learned, and one lesson that I have really brought into my life, and I'm proud of how I brought into my life, is that I'm very intuitively aligned to when a person's energy is off center and when a conversation is not going to go in the manner that it is, or how they frame that question. As soon as they frame a question, as soon as I see the energy is soft, I don't say anything about them. I take full responsibility for that
Mm-hmm.
situation and answering that question. And I say something very simple. I say, that's a really great question. But the truth is, I need some time to process it. And I need some time to do justice to this question. And can you please give me a day? And I promise you, I'll come back tomorrow and we'll chat about this. And I'll bring more concrete answers, more concrete thoughts and feelings. Right now, your question's powerful. I want to do justice to it, but I'm caught unawares. And I don't think I can do justice to it in my current state of mind. So, to honor you, to honor the relationship, to honor everything, I'm going to take some time. And what I'm doing by taking time is I'm really giving their neurological system a chance to just reset, to calm down, so that when I do revisit this conversation, we can have a more fruitful conversation around it. Plus, I'm also giving myself the time to process it. And I think another powerful lesson that I learned is that do not allow yourself to be rushed by external circumstances or by external situations. If you are a trauma surgeon and your patient is dying, by all means be rushed. If you need to have a conversation, it is not a high pressure situation or a situation that dictates you needing to rush. Learning from that, a lot of people give, and this is, I don't know how this will land with everyone, but a lot of people give a heightened sense of importance to the things they do. You know, they're
Mm.
not that important.
Yeah.
Even a pilot, I was having a conversation with the pilot. I said, so how important is what you do? And he gives me this long 20-minute call about how important and how many variables and stuff. I said, yeah, but really and truly, everything's operating on autopilot and you're there in case of emergency. So the importance of your job kicks in really difficult, extenuating circumstances, which is bad weather or foggy weather or things like that, where a system has failed, which you'll probably be called on about 4 or 5 times over the course of your career, not every single day. And what people don't realize is that when you give yourself a heightened sense of importance for the things you do, you create a heightened sense of expectation for the things you do. And expectation creates
Mm.
burden, and burden creates stress. And people don't want the stress, but they want the importance, because importance could bring you more financial reward and all sorts of things like that. So finding the balance between how you view what is important and the importance with which you word it or describe it to the world could mean the difference between how you manage stress, anxiety on a day-to-day basis. So I generally really peel away the layers. I tell people, I said, yeah, I do good work, I do interesting work. There's a beautiful word called a heretic. A heretic is someone who thinks of something completely different from a completely different lens. I said, I
Mm.
bring a heretic
Mm-hmm.
sort of ideology to any problem. But my work's not life threatening.
Mm-hmm.
My work's not important. Yeah. If I'm not there, there's a good chance the guy will win. There's a good chance he may not win, but it's not going to be the end of his life. It may knock him back a little bit. It may knock me back a little bit. But in that knock, there's also something else to learn from there. So downplay the importance of what you do on a daily basis, and you become a significantly happier person.
Well, that's a really beautiful lesson there, Shamal. And, I wanted to ask you this other question, which you have, in a way, kind of answered it already. And whenever I have met you and known you for almost 3 years now, and one thing that I, really admire a lot about you is how humble you are. And, people can feel that warmth around you, right? And oftentimes, when we see a lot of people after certain successes that people have, they start feeling that, I am superior to other people. And, as you said, right, my work or my job that I do is very, very important. And, put that, as you said, importance and significance in what they do. And, that kind of makes a lot of people arrogant, right? So one thing that you, as you have already said, that, what, my work is not necessarily life threatening. And what I can sense from what you've just said is you keep reminding yourself that, and I think that is such a great way to be grounded and at the same time stay humble, right? Are there any other things that you'd like to share that really helps you stay humble and grounded?
Yeah, there's a few things you can do. The world is really, everyone should do this exercise, and maybe let's try this exercise, even though this is an audio podcast, or maybe they'll see some visuals. Okay, so I want you to imagine where you are right now. So BJ, you're sitting here. Okay, and now let's pull the lens back and see yourself sitting in the room that you are. So you've moved the lens one back. Now move the lens one back and see
Mm-hmm.
yourself in the house that you are. Then move the lens back and see
Mm-hmm.
yourself in the lane that you are. Then and see yourself
Mm-hmm.
in the district that you are. Then the lens goes back in the town that you are. And then the lens goes back in the state that you are. And the lens goes back into the country that you are. And the lens goes back
Mm-hmm.
into the continent that you are. And then the lens goes
Mm-hmm.
back into the hemisphere that you're in. And the lens goes back into the world or the planet that you're on. And then the lens goes further back into the cosmic part of the universe that you rest in. And the lens can go further back into the big dark universe where you now in relation, Earth is in relation to Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto and the Milky Way. And right now, you can't even see Earth. That's the size of Earth in relation to everything else. And the lens can go even
Mm-hmm.
further back till everything melts into nothingness. And then it comes back all the way through the Milky Way, through the cosmos, till you see Earth. Then you narrow until you see the hemisphere. Then you narrow until you see the continent. Then you narrow until you see your country. Then you narrow until you see your state. Then you see your district. Then you see your city. Then you see your lane. Then you see your house. Then you see your room. Then you see you. And now we take it in and we go further down, and I can't see you anymore. I see a cell. And then I go deeper down and I don't see a cell. I see what is inside a cell. And then I go deeper down and I don't see what is inside a cell. I just see everything that looks like cosmic matter, exactly like what the universe looked like. And I go deeper down and I see that even what is there is moving and has life. And I go deeper down into the cellular structure of that, and I see that even matter exists in that point of view. And then I bring myself back up again. Now, if you've closed your eyes and done this journey with me, you have really and truly melted yourself into nothingness on both extremities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you absorb this realization, then what is there to be proud about? What is there to be arrogant about?
Mm-hmm.
Who you are and the perception of who you are, right, is only in relation to a minuscule part of reality. But the larger cosmos of reality, we are not even identifiable. We're not even there. We're playing a role in it. So just doing this exercise every now and then will help you ground your reality into nothingness. Right? Doesn't mean you are nothing. Right? You're still valuable. You're still
Mm-hmm.
the essence of energy. But the ego can melt away when you do this. So that's a beautiful exercise that I like to do every now and then in my meditation. Yeah, expand my consciousness, contract my consciousness, move it laterally. When you do things like this, then there's no need for ego.
Great. So I want to switch a little bit of gears here. And Shamal, as you mentioned earlier as well, the cutthroat competition world, that's the sports where you come from and where you have trained athletes and helped them with their performance, right? And in the sports worlds, you're constantly competing with someone else, right? But in the real life scenario, right, competition usually is not a good thing for one's own mental peace. And obviously that might help you to maybe grow in a in unhealthy way, maybe with at the cost of your maybe the mental peace, I would say. So then so let's say when I want to know this from you, okay? So when you feel competitive or when you feel like you are comparing with someone else, what is the brief to yourself, or how do you kind of balance that with the fact that, oh, you know what, I have my own path and I have my own growth journey, and I don't have to really compete with someone else?
There are a few things. The question is, am I saying to myself that I need to compete with someone? And if you're saying to yourself that I need to compete with someone, then you really need to have a different emotional checkbox, because we all are completely different people. If somebody else is trying to compete with you and is doing things in an external environment to limit your opportunities and limit the impact you could make in an environment, then even that would require a different set of emotional checkboxes for you. Now, I find myself in this situation quite a lot. In a sporting world, I'm always around athletes who think they're very important. But more than the athletes, I'm around support staff who seem to protect their territory a lot, overly protective of a territory.
Mm,
A physio doesn't want
yeah.
anyone to say anything to it. The coach doesn't want anyone to talk to an athlete before. The coach is scared of his assistant coaches. The physio is scared of the doctor. The doctor's scared of the massage therapist. Everyone's trying to kiss someone's ass, but it's scared of someone else in the same ecosystem. It's not a healthy place to be. And I've been in these environments many, many times. And fundamentally, what happens in that time is, could I make an impact in the environment? The answer is yes. Could the impact that I make be done by someone else? The answer is yes. Then I ask myself, what is the greatest impact that I'm going to bring in my environment? And that's probably been the biggest shift I've had in my life. I realize that the greatest impact I bring into an environment is not my application of science. The greatest impact I bring into an environment is my energy, is my ability to get everyone to just pause for a moment to look at things from multiple perspectives and possibilities. Not everyone can get you to just sit silent for a while. That's a talent, that's a skill that I work at. And the person who gets you to pause for a moment can then give you the power to look at something from a different multidirectional, multiplanar perspective. And I realize that that's the greatest thing that I'm going to bring to the table. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring that all the time. But I'm never fighting in an ecosystem. If I feel that the opportunity is not presenting, if I feel that what I'm going to say is going to come at the expense of upsetting the environmental energy or the culture, then I don't say anything.
Hmm.
I step away from the environment, because you'll understand when you do the cosmic expansion exercise, you realize that even in that change room, the culture in that change room is more important than you. It's bigger than you. The team is bigger than you. And once something is bigger than you, it should take more importance or more precedence than you. Right.
Mm,
Now, ego is a pseudo of what we think is big. So some person may think, I scored more runs, I'm a bigger player. No, you scored more runs for sure.
mm,
But on a human lens, we have the same number of bones, the same blood flowing through us. You've expressed your talent in a different way that is more recognizable in the current ecosystem. But you should practice
mm,
realizing that you and I are equal. Now, the reason why the culture is bigger than both of us is because it took you
mm,
plus me plus 20 other people to make the culture. That's why it's bigger
mm.
than all of us. So when you understand your position in an environment, it's very easy to understand the energy you bring in and how to drive that energy into that ecosystem. When you're unaware of the role you play in an environment, then the ego takes over. When the ego takes over, you're now going to start operating from a part of your brain that wouldn't make you very proud.
Yeah, in the last few questions, Samuel, one of the things that's constantly coming up and which is the basis of a lot of things for one to realize is awareness, right? For you to heal, you got to be aware of first, as you said, like you gotta be willing to it, and then the very first step after that is you gotta be aware of it, right? For you to be centered and humility, the first step again is like you gotta be aware of where you are. And even the whole exercise of that you suggested is kind of bringing the awareness, right? So for somebody whom concept of awareness is completely new, how can one start maybe becoming more aware of the things that's going on their life so that they can start developing this? What are the few things that you suggest? Like for me personally, I realized meditation is one of those things that has helped me to calm down, slow my mind, and just look at the thoughts that's going on my head. And that really helps me bring the awareness and understand what's going on, right?
Yeah. So the first question is, where do you want to shift your life? What aspect of your life do you want to shift? Do you want to shift in your career? Do you want to shift
Mm,
in your relationships? Do you want to
yeah.
shift in your mental health? Do you want to shift in your career? So draw your awareness to the area that you want to shift. Then fundamentally, let's go back to the 5 steps of healing. The first question is, am I willing to do what is needed to shift? If the willingness is not
Mhm.
there, awareness won't follow. So, a lot of people, and this is the first tipping point, 99% of the world have a desire to improve. 1% of the world are willing to do what is needed to have that desire manifest. So, very simply, what is the quotient of willingness that you have to move your life in a certain direction within that plane that you pick? That willingness will drive
Mm.
awareness. Now, depending on where you are, so if, for
Sorry
example,
to
if you
cut
want,
you, but yeah, I mean, that shows up, right? If you are willing, then you are ready to take every action that is required for you to make that change and shift, right?
absolutely, absolutely, it shows up in many shapes and forms, and the awareness is now a byproduct of that. So once you're willing to do a change, you
Mm.
start automatically asking yourself, what do I need to change? Just that question itself is
Mm.
awareness, isn't it? So
Yeah.
awareness is a byproduct of willingness. Once you're aware, then you
Mm.
can start
Yeah.
taking responsibility and action into play. So fundamentally, awareness is simply a byproduct of willingness. So you may be aware of a problem, right? But the awareness of a problem and the awareness of what is needed to change that problem are two completely different things. Like, for example,
Mm.
I'm aware that I need so much of money to retire. Let's take an example. I'm aware I need $1 million to retire, hypothetically saying. Am I willing to
Mm.
work a little harder to get that $1 million? Answer is no. Right? End of the question. Right? Because I can't ask the next question of what should I do, because you're not willing to do. Now,
Mm.
scenario two, I need $1 million to retire. Am I willing to do something different to get that $1 million? Answer is yes. Question: what is it that I'm willing to do differently to allow that $1 million to? What is it that I'm willing to do differently is awareness. Awareness followed
Mm.
willingness.
That's beautifully explained. It begins with the willingness, and the first question that you ask when you say, like, hey, what is it that I need to change? What is it that I need to do to change the current scenario? Right? If I want to go from A to B, then what is it that about A that I need to change so that I can move towards B? Then that's how you develop the awareness. First is the willingness. That's a beautifully explained, Shamal. So one thing, Shamal, I really get fascinated with the people like you who have this depth of understanding about the life, and a lot of wisdom about life in general, and has got a lot of answers to the questions about the life. How do you educate yourself? Like, how do you take in the information, process them, and how do you kind of first learn? And I want to also, like, there are a lot of questions that's going on in my head, like I want to ask all of them at once. So let's first begin with, how do you learn? What is the process of taking up the information? And we'll move to the second part, which is, how do you kind of connect the dots and the different things that you have learned? Is there a way that you kind of organize all of your learning together so that you can use them at the relevant place? I'm just curious to know that.
There are few fundamental steps if I'm looking at my life. One is the willingness to learn from anybody and everybody. So I don't have a set of mentors that I go to for all answers, and I do not get distracted by the popularity or success of a person. So right now, for example,
Mm.
everybody wants to learn from a Vijay Shekhar Sharma or a Kunal Shah or someone like that, or a Bhavish Agrawal. But the truth is that an entrepreneur in a small shop who has failed as much can teach you as much about life, right? So the willingness to learn from everybody is super important. The second thing is I learn from multiple fields. So I'm always reading and studying about people in aeronautics, in art, in architecture, in biology, in cosmology, in astrology. I'm learning about mechanical engineering. I'm learning about every subject on the planet. I'm learning and peeling away the layers of it. And then when something interests me, I go into the making of it. So what is it that actually goes
Mm.
into that? What is the thought process that goes into it? I'm very intrigued with how someone thought about something before it actually manifested. And then I think the most powerful thing is that I know that everything has a percentage of failure attached to it. So I account for the failure. So I'm always accounting for failure. So, for example, when I'm learning a new piece of information, in applying that information, there's going to be a failure quotient in it, right? So I'm accounting for the failure quotient. So failure is never knocking me back because I've always thought about it. Vijay, I used to ask
Mm.
and how did I learn this? Was I learned this through ultra marathon running. I'm saying, there are days when I want to go to the gym and after 5 kilometers, I stop running, I'm exhausted. But yet, there'll be a day when I can run a 100-kilometer race and I wouldn't stop at all. I'll just keep going. Now, what
Mm.
is the difference between those 2 days? And the difference is not in the body. The difference is in mentally understanding the hurdles that I'm going to overcome. On the day when I'm planning to do 100 kilometers, I've accounted for every potential variable that could come in: blisters, dehydration, heat, cold, whatever, getting lost, whatever it is, I've accounted for it. So my mind knows how to overcome it when it comes. When I go to the gym in the morning, I've not prepared for the hurdles that could come in there. So I never get overcome. I can never overcome them because the mind's not prepared for them. So when you account for failure, you think of the hurdles and you know how to jump over them. So that's really what I'm doing. And then the last thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to apply knowledge laterally. So I'm taking a
Mm.
particular skill and I test myself this at all the time. So I take, for example, let's assume a methodology that I would use in training a professional athlete. Let's take a sliver of the science. For example, microbiome. I am testing gut microbiome. And I know that understanding your gut microbiome can help with your food ingestion, which can help with performance. Right. Now, the question is, how do I bring the same level of science with the same level of importance and the same level of urgency to a chartered accountant, to a painter, to a sculptor,
Mm.
to a teacher, to a doctor? Doctor's the easy one. To an astronaut, to a person in a minefield. How do I take that same piece of information laterally everywhere? And what that's doing is that's
Mm.
teaching me the art of how to laterally use a skill and how to laterally use a piece of information. And the more you do this, you get used to thinking laterally. And when you get used to thinking laterally,
Mm.
life becomes a very, very interesting place.
Yeah. That's a really interesting piece, and I'm gonna pick some of those things that you've shared there and implement in my own life. So the other thing, Shamal, that I want to ask to you is, because when you are at a certain stage doing certain things, there are so many people who want to work with you, or maybe there are so many. So one could be in the professional level, right, where people want to work with you, or others could be on the social circle, or your people that you have known come up with the requests and the things that they want to do with you or together with you. And there might be things where that does not resonate with your value system, or is not a priority for you, or is not going to help you in any way to kind of go towards the goals and the vision that you have for your life. And how do you say no to those kind of requests? Is there a way that you use, or a template that you use, or the heuristics that you use to kind of say no to the things that really does not resonate with what you're trying to do?
So for me, and I mean, this is not a great answer, to be honest, and it's not an answer I would ask everyone to apply. But the thing that works for me is very simple. All I'm doing is I'm looking at the quantum of time a person needs from me. And the reason I'm looking at that only is because if people are asking me to jump on a 30-minute call or a chat or a podcast recording, I'll say yes to 90% of them. Why? Because it's not about how big that person's following is or whatever. If one person is
Mm-hmm.
listening to that podcast and it gives me the opportunity to impact that one person, I take it. But the second thing
Mm.
is that, most people make the mistake of always wanting to associate with people who can move them forward. But remember, you are the
Mm.
person who can move someone else forward. You understand?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if 1 hour of my day can go to propelling someone's life forward in a direction that can help them become more impactful, more sustainable, give them more direction and more purpose, that's an hour well spent. So the mere decision making for me is how much of my time is it actually going to take. And really and
Mm.
truly, Vijay, I spend at least 6 to 8 hours of my own day just studying myself, watching videos, reading, studying, making notes, journaling, all of that. So the time for what people ask generally comes out of that. And that's really my only yardstick, because my grandfather once told me a beautiful story, or this is not even a story, it's a real situation that happened. When I was growing up at home, we used to make sandwiches for beggars every single day, right? We used to make 2 or 3 loaves, and my father had a shop at the bottom, and these people were begging, used to come for sandwiches there. And one day in the afternoon, my grandfather walks down at about 4:30 into my dad's shop, and the basket of sandwiches is completely full. And my grandfather got a little upset. He says, "How can you have not given these the whole day? They're sitting here. Why are you wasting it?" So my grandfather said, really and truly, my dad tells him, "No beggars came today. I couldn't find a single one. You wouldn't be." My grandfather said, "That is absolutely ridiculous. I don't believe that. There are beggars everywhere, every single way." Upsettingly, and he was 80 at this stage, took the basket and he started walking down the road. He walked a kilometer and a half through the whole town, up, walked a kilometer and a half back, and he came back with a full basket of sandwiches. And my father asked him what happened, and he said, "You're right, there's no beggars today." And the important lesson right here is that when someone knocks on your door for help, even that is something to be grateful for. Because karma or good action or dana or seva is a benediction from the universe. You need an
Mm.
opportunity to serve. Without an opportunity to serve, you cannot
Yeah.
serve. If nobody is hungry, who are
Mm.
you going to give food to? If everyone's rich, who can you help? You understand? If nobody wants to listen to you, who are you going to talk to? So gratitude comes from that in the first place. So I look at everybody who knocks on my door as an opportunity to serve. And the only filter, because of the world we live in, is time right now. I'm not looking at anything else.
Awesome. So I will ask one more question, Shamal, and we'll call it off. So, what is the one question that you've been asking yourself a lot lately?
So let me give you some background. My definition of success is to be able to listen to my heart, the strength to listen to my heart, to my intuition, the courage to take action, and the conviction or strength to accept the consequences of that action. That's my definition of success. So listen to my heart, have the courage to take action, and have the confidence or the strength to accept the outcomes guided by my heart. And the thing that I ask myself more and more every single day is, how can I learn to surrender more? How can I learn to surrender to every emotion? Each emotion has its own process of surrender. Each process has its own process of surrender. So, how can I learn to surrender to love? And amazing, I went through a beautiful experience just a few weeks ago where I've always been someone, like in a relationship, I'm always serving, I'm always helping, trying to do that. And I went through a beautiful meditation ceremony where my only intention was teach me how to surrender to love. And I went through that, and it was a beautiful
Mm.
experience with breath work, and I learned it. And 48 hours after that experience, the first overwhelming feeling in my body was fear. And I
Mm.
realized the opposite of love is fear. People say the opposite of love is indifference. No. When you're
Mm.
indifferent, there's no love. The opposite of love is
Mm.
fear. Because when you love, it's the fear of losing it that comes in.
Yes,
It's not
absolutely.
indifference. I read this quote so many times, I've probably even used that quote. The opposite of love is indifference. The opposite of love is not indifferent. A person who's indifferent does not love, and he's not invested in love. The opposite of love is fear,
Hmm.
in a different context than we normally use it. And this
Yeah.
overwhelming feeling of fear that just came in, fear of losing the one you love, fear of getting hurt, fear of emotional pain. And then comes the process of, how do I surrender to that fear? And then comes, how
Mm.
do you surrender to trust?
Wow.
How do you do that? And each one will take you down its own rabbit hole, which is exceptionally beautiful. But that's the question that's been on my mind and been sitting with me for a very, very long time. And I ask myself every single day, how can I surrender more?
Wow, this is beautiful. On that beautiful note, Shamal, for everybody who's listening to this podcast, Shamal and I, we are super, super excited to be releasing, Shamal's podcast, Perishable Wisdom, which already has 5 released episodes. And Shamal brings profound insights from the world of sports and psychology combined together to, help you guys get better, and you guys have seen the depth of the work that Shamal does. And now imagine that happening with Shamal plus his guests who are equally an expert in the fields and the things that they do and the depth of the work that they do. So the podcast is called Perishable Wisdom. Shamal, would you like to share some what Perishable Wisdom is for everybody who is listening, and why should they check the podcast out?
Vijay, thank you so much. Firstly, thank you to you and your team who've helped me make this entire thing possible. Perishable Wisdom was really a dream for a long time, and you gave it wings and allowed it to fly. The reason we called it Perishable Wisdom is exactly that. It doesn't need any explaining, that every single piece of knowledge that comes into the gambit of your view or your realization has a shelf life in it. So, what I'm trying to subconsciously get people to understand is action the knowledge you know right now, because it won't be relevant at a certain point in time later. And it's really been a beautiful journey of interviewing some really powerful guests, friends of mine who are thought leaders in fields. I mean, we've had people, the last episode, we had someone like Tim Gabbard who spoke on workload management. And for those people who are interested in training, Professor Tim has published more than 250 peer reviewed papers just on workload or for an athlete. So, how much should you
Mm,
actually lift in a gym and how should you recover and game specific training? 250 papers, scientific papers, is a significant amount. We've had Adam
yeah,
Roa. Adam Roa, who talks about self love and vulnerability, is a spoken word artist who actually went viral in the world. He's had more than
yeah,
50 million views from his poetry online. It's just powerful, and you really love it. We've had Marcus Rainey, who was a doctor who's worked with NASA. He's worked with the Royal Air Force. Then we had Paddy Upton, for example, who was a coach at Rajasthan Royals. And there's some really exciting people coming up, like Marissa Pierce coming up, Mimi Nicklin, who's an empathy leadership coach who specializes in teaching empathy to leaders in corporates, and tons more coming up. So I'm thoroughly excited because the tagline for the show is the rabbit hole of everything possible, probable, and illogical. And that's what we really talk about.
yes.
I'm, as a host, I am pushing the envelope on things that may sound absolutely crazy. I am asking some really stupid questions, getting them to explain some really simple concepts so that everyone understands it. But the last thing I'd say about the podcast is, PJ, it's been a journey in itself for me. I've seen how I have evolved and how it's going on. The art of podcasting, the art of speaking to someone, the art of interviewing, the composure I bring to it, the level of preparedness that I bring to it. It's been such a remarkable journey. And to everyone listening out there, what I learned through the process of podcasting is that we all need to pick one thing in which we can challenge our fears. For me, podcasting was
Yeah,
that, and I'm growing through the process of podcasting. So please subscribe and
absolutely.
listen to it. Be a little bit kind, because I'm still in the process of learning how to do this.
No, absolutely. Shamal does a great job of having conversations with people and wisdom that he brings on the show. It's been such a great thing for us at Wine Studio to produce the show and bring this together with you. And as we are having this conversation, the podcast Perishable Wisdom, which I'm going to obviously link on the description of this episode, which you can find on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all the other podcast listening platform, is already rocking the charts, is number 5 on self improvement on Apple Podcast in India, alongside Robin Sharma, Jim Quick, and so on and so forth, right? So this is great to kind of have the show with just 5 episodes already rocking the chart. This speaks the volume of the kind of content that's there. So I highly, highly encourage that you guys go ahead and listen to that show, because if you love the inspiring talk, I'm sure you guys are going to love that even more. So, Shamal, would you like to add anything on that one before we?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vijay, for the opportunity of being on the Inspiring Podcast. To everyone listening, do get in touch. You can write to me on Instagram at Shamal. Follow the Perishable Wisdom page on Instagram, because Vijay and I got something really exciting coming up. We're going to create that into a community with some super powerful hacks, videos. It's going to be closed door very, very soon. So go and subscribe there. Join us, share this wisdom, and let's create a community where we can learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically giving the platform for the people who enjoy personal transformation, who love getting better in their life. Imagine everybody of that mindset coming together and learning from each other. That's the vision that we have. Again, more on that later on. But thank you, Shamal. It's always such a pleasure to have a chat with you. And I continue learning a ton from you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you so much, Vijay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, or wherever you get a podcast from. And don't forget to check our new podcast called Perishable Wisdom by clicking on the link shared on the description below, or searching for Perishable Wisdom on your favorite podcast app. You can access the show notes of this episode by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/109. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you in the next. Now, go out there and do something inspiring.